Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I'm with Shaun McLaughlin. You guys might know him best as the associate producer of the Superman animated series. How are you doing today?
Good. I did basically anything at Warner's between 1996 and 2006. I was a producer on almost anything with anybody, guys in tights beating the crap out of each other. That was me.
So that's Superman the animated series, Batman Beyond, Static Shock, Justice League Unlimited. You missed Batman the animated series by like this much.
No, but I did the new Batman Adventures
and the new Batman Superman Adventures, right?
Yeah, and I also did Mystery. I was a production manager on Mystery of the Batwoman,
and also Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker.
Yep. I put the plan together for how the crew. They were originally going to outsource that, and I put the plan together for how we could keep that in house.
What are the main things that you learned from working on those shows?
Time management is everything, and you need a production needs somebody like me who has creative instincts and business instincts to meld the two together. And they used to describe me as the brick wall between the creative people and the money people. I knew when to say, this is what we need, and this is how we have to do it. And also, but I also, I knew about money, and I was willing to cut the budget when it was necessary if you're out creative ways to do it and keep the quality up.
I want to ask you something, because around 10 years ago, I was running a Facebook page, and I posted a YouTube link to Superman saying goodbye to Dan Turpin.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole scene, in the end, what the world really needed wasn't a Superman, just a brave one, which was
from the apocalypse.
Yeah, which is, for me, it's the best scene in the whole series. Yeah. And then in the comments, there were some people who were saying like, oh, the problem with Superman the animated series was this, because they were demanding this, they were demanding that. And then you messaged me at the time, I don't know if you remember this, you said, where do these people get their facts from? Because none of that is true. And like, how do you deal with something like that? Working on something so high profile, and then just all of these facts going around that aren't true.
Oh, you just have to ignore it. I mean, otherwise you're going to spend, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. People make stuff. I don't remember that specific one, but I know there's been, lots of stuff about who did what and how it was done, and it's just not true. It's just not the way it happened. And if you want to, fight all that stuff, it's just a game. You're just spending your whole life playing whack-a-mole, and you're never actually getting anything done. I think what happens is that people logic stuff out, but logic very rarely applies to the real world. So, things just happen sometimes. And people don't like that idea, right? They don't like it's kind of like conspiracy theories. Nobody wants to believe that things just happen. That yes, sometimes one guy with a gun and having a bad day can change history, and that can happen, and that's giving it a probably more weight than a cartoon deserves. But yeah, I think people just logic stuff out, and it just winds up expanding. I had a friend who in college, he wrote a joke article saying that Bedtime for Bonzo, the Ronald Reagan movie, had actually been written by Bertolt Brecht in his exile from Berlin during the Nazi days. And it began as that, and then it morphed into a studio movie in the 50s. And that was picked up as fact around the world, and there was no truth to it at all.
Yeah,
but the thing was, it was just like, if you knew Brecht's work enough, the idea of a dialectic theater, that the idea that there's some kind of like dialogue between man and ape, you could sort of kind of see how it went together, but it's not true. But I've read it several places since then, and it was just this guy writing a joke in a college newspaper.
The modern equivalent of that kind of thing for me is, that meme where Iron Man says to Captain America, "What you need is some solid dick," and then it says linguistic shift.
Yeah.
And I'm like, people just believe this shit.
Yeah.
It's not real.
Yeah, people just make it up, and they go along from there. And they people are, I think human beings are very literal, and that's part of kind of what's driven me to do the project I'm working on now. But I think they don't want to believe. I mean, it's sort of like Superman. People always say the problem with Superman is that he's not dark enough. That there's nothing really there, because he's just a Boy Scout, and that's looking at it from a small perspective. But if you open it up, then there's a huge dramatic story to be told there about this guy who's a Boy Scout and wants to save the world, and he can't do everything to save the world. So it's a matter of perspective.
I always got the feeling from watching your shows that Superman was not a Boy Scout. It felt a lot like his whole thing was control, like he was actually restraining everything he wanted to be doing or could be doing. Like, and it comes out because your take on Superman is pretty sarcastic sometimes.
In some ways. Englehart once said that the suspension of disbelief in Batman isn't that he can do all these things, it's that he doesn't kill people. And the suspension of disbelief in Superman isn't that he can fly, it's that he doesn't take over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe
that. It's that kind of change in perspective that I think makes a difference.
Do you have a particular episode in any of those shows that you have the fondest memories of, is a favorite of yours?
It's hard looking back because at this point I see more of the problems than anything else.
Spoken like a true creative person.
The world's finest three-parter, I think, was great because it was a return to Batman, and there was actually some nervousness around the crew of going back to Batman and being able to do it again. And I remember when the first footage came back, going in Bruce's office, the producers, and closing the door so the crew couldn't see, and watching the first footage of World's Finest Part 1, and real quiet, and everybody kind of nervous to see it. And then at the end, Bruce said, "Well, boys, we did it. We topped the last Batman series." That, or the first footage coming back on Batman Beyond, was really exciting.
Yeah. I have always called Batman Beyond up to that point. I said it was the best Spider-Man cartoon.
There was more than a little bit of that in it. And also just, it was a huge sort of graphic shift in the way the shows were going to be approached. And actually, don't think the shows I worked on matched that in terms of graphic quality.
Also, lots of it was way more rock than the other cartoons. Did you prefer working on the solo cartoons? Because I know, looking at the last night of the TwiKnight, that you really have a soft spot for self-contained storylines. And by the time you get to Justice League, you're working on really longer storylines and a long-running arc.
Justice League was problematic because there's 7 characters. I mean, one of the reasons that Bruce didn't want to do it was because there's 7 characters to service.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons it wound up being 2-parters. But the challenge of that was really interesting, to figure out how we could do that. And especially at the time, there were budget cuts going on at the studio because the whole financing of animation changed during that time. So it was really, the challenge of Justice League was interesting. I don't think anything for me was as exciting as the first development and doing the first few episodes of Batman Beyond, and then the development in the first few episodes of Static Shock also were really exciting, because especially because Batman Beyond was clearly coming from the, what the DC universe had been at that time. And then with Static Shock, Scott Geralds was the producer. And there was a different sort of viewpoint on it. And there was also a different idea of what this could be, with a person of color for a lead. And there was a definite idea on maybe trying to skew a little bit younger. Because a lot of the criticism coming from the network was that the audience we had was too old, was not the 6 to 11 that they were looking for.
Because they had aged out from Batman and Superman? Was that it?
No. Batman and Superman attracted an older audience. At one point, the network
just
told
in general.
Okay. At one point, the network told us that Superman, the animated series, had the highest rating of people over 20 at 7:30 on a Saturday morning in history. And the network was not happy about that, because it wasn't who their advertising demographic was.
Yeah, I understand. So you asked me what I did for work. I actually worked for Nielsen Philippines. So
okay.
Completely understand what's going on there.
And it always seems backwards. It's like, well, we have to make a show for this demographic, but a ton of these people are watching. So why don't we just we've got this audience. Why don't we do something with this audience?
Yeah, I think it's I don't know about the States, but a lot of people advertise by day part instead of to the specific show, which is really weird, actually. It's actually a really weird decision to make, just to advertise by the time of the day. But anyway,
it goes back. I think it goes back to the early days of television. I think it goes, and radio even, because they used to, the daytime was for women, then kids were after school, and then everybody else was after that. So I think they're sort of stuck in that way of thinking.
So why didn't they just put Superman at a later time, if that was the case?
Okay. Alan Burnett said sell beer commercials.
7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your project, The Last Night of the TwiKnight. So this is a mockumentary about a super. I'll just ask you to explain it. Actually,
it's a mockumentary about the last night, a sort of Dark Avenger type character getting prepared to go out for his last night of patrol. He's aged out of the game, but he doesn't quite believe it. He's kind of like the football player who thinks he's got one more game in him, or the boxer who thinks he's got one more fight in him. And it's pretty clear that while he's in really good shape, that he can't do the things that he once could do. But he's still determined to go out and fight crime, because that's what he does. The other problem is that he's lost his great wealth to a personal injury suit to a villain who got hurt in a fight and sued him. So he has gone from living in a mansion to living in a small suburban home, from driving a souped up special car to driving a beat up old Mustang. And his secret headquarters is now his basement, with a lot of plastic boxes holding things.
Is it his last night by choice?
I don't think he would ever have a last night by choice. And I don't think, and he's actually not aware that this is his last night as he's getting ready. He understands that he's getting older. He understands that he can't do perhaps everything that he could do, but he thinks that he can keep going. And while we're following him getting ready, we're doing a flashback. There's an action sequence flashback where we show what he was like just a few months before. And we also do interviews with a couple of his former enemies and a couple of his former sidekicks. So it becomes apparent as we go on what's happened to him.
So it does take on that documentary style telling.
Yes.
With a lot of interviews and everything.
Right. It's not just following one guy around his house. It's going back and showing different things and showing different perspectives. The villain have moved on. The villains and sidekicks have moved on. Their lives have become different. It's he who can't give up the idea of justice.
There's there seems to be okay. So Alan Moore in Watchmen basically points out that in order to be a superhero, you kind of probably have to be obsessed with being a superhero to stay a superhero. How much of that plays into this?
It takes an extreme person to do something like that.
So when this film starts, I like that you call that it is a superhero film, which is a different kind of superhero film.
Mm-hmm. I always thought, I used to have these arguments at the studio, and a couple times when I've been writing live action projects. My background is theater. That's what I was trained in undergrad, and in grad school, I went to grad school for writing theater and movies. And I always argued that drama is not just big fights and explosions. Drama is what goes on between people. Mm-hmm. And I think there's room for a different kind of superhero story. There's a different kind of story to tell that isn't necessarily fighting a villain. And that was like my problem with Smallville, was that the first episode was so good. And with Smallville, you have a story of a guy who is, every teenager thinks they are the biggest weirdo that ever lived. And this one actually is. And there's plenty of drama to mine from that, let alone you don't have to have Kryptonite villain of the week. And I think that story goes through, all the superheroes. I always like the one-off episodes of comics and movies. Like the example I've been using is there's an episode of Magnum PI where Magnum goes home for the first time. You meet his stepfather and you find out why he left to go into the service in the first place. And those things always resonated with me. So I kind of want to do the ultimate one-off.
I feel that we've seen I feel like we've seen the ending of a particular Dark Knight back in 1986 when he returned.
Yeah.
And knowing that, of course, you're a Batman fan. How much are you pulling from a story like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns?
In terms of
how much would you say that's informing the movie, or?
It's informing the themes. It's not informing the story. I think what people forget about the Dark Knight Returns is that that's a very personal vision coming from a certain person at a certain point in his life. And yes, it's a Batman story, but it's also a very personal story. And I think I know part of the problem of what happened to comics after that is everybody looked at that and said, oh, this is the way to tell a story now. Everything's got to be like this. And, things have gotten progressively darker and grittier. So if you're to look at this in terms of like the timeline of the Dark Knight Returns, this would be sort of like the point where Bruce decides, I'm not going to do this anymore. So it's before the Dark Knight Returns actually happens. I don't think it needs to be a big dramatic story like in Batman Beyond, where he has a heart attack and picks up a gun, and that's what tells him he has to stop. Because I don't think the character ever would stop. I think he has to be forced to stop somehow.
So give me some background on kickstarting a movie, because I've spoken to a lot of comic book creators about kickstarting a comic book. Sometimes when they're kickstarting it, it's in a different stage of completion. So how much of this is done and how much of it still needs to be done?
It's not completely cast. There's a couple of parts open. It is the script is done. It's half storyboarded. Almost all the storyboards are done. And some of the costumes are put together. So the way I like to work, this is going to be live action. The way I like to work is that I storyboard it out completely like it's animated, so that we can go in and shoot pretty much just the material we need and move pretty quickly. So we're looking at I think a 4 or 5 day shoot tops to get this done. And that's mostly because it's going to require moving from location to location. So there's nothing filmed yet, but the key crew members are in place.
And what would the running time of the movie end up looking like?
20 minutes.
Okay.
I
And
think, shorter is always better. Whenever I've shot something, I've always found out that, it's better to cut stuff out than to try and push for some kind of length. I don't need to make a commercial break this time.
what is the benefit of doing shorter stories? Because I know that whenever somebody's trying, to start their career, create their first story ever, the temptation is, I'm gonna make this big sprawling epic. I'm gonna copy Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, make 21 movies. So, like, what do you learn from doing shorter stories?
You learn the actual doing of it. It's not about, it's kind of like when we in animation, you'd have somebody that would turn in a piece as a portfolio piece, and it would be fully colored and rendered and inked. And what you would talk to people about is, well, what's the silhouette? Why is the silhouette important? You talk about Batman, Wolverine, even Wonder Woman. They have a distinctive silhouette. If you see them without anything filled in, you pretty much know who they are. So this is like doing the silhouette of that. This is a very distinctive story. It's about a moment in time as opposed to a universe, trying to build a universe. This is focusing on the character. And this is not to get too serious. I mean, the inspiration for this is what we do in the shadows. Mm-hmm. But it is focused on the character and what the character wants and needs at this particular moment in his life. So, Lord of the Rings is about an overall heroic quest in the form of sort of like romantic literature of the early Renaissance, I believe, what's called early modern thing. This is more along the lines of O. Henry or the other writers of that genre sort of escape me, but it's a moment in time, a complete story focused on one person's needs at that moment.
Can you tell me the actors that you've cast so far? I know you said it in the trailer, as well as for the benefit of everyone else. What other parts need to be cast? Are you holding a casting call or?
No, I'm going to be reaching out to people.
Okay.
One by one. I'm trying to cast this with people I know. For instance, Peter Michael Marino, who's playing the archenemy, the provost. Retired archenemy, is a college friend of mine. We went to college together. He's a terrific actor. He's sort of the dean of American solo show performers. He's done shows in London and Edinburgh. He did a long run off Broadway. He's going to be playing the Chancellor. I have an actress named Jenny Ney, who's a local actress, but she's also worked in Los Angeles and Texas. She's a director. She's written musicals. She's going to be playing the retired villainous Lady Avnik, now called Jordana, who hopes her husband doesn't see this movie because he doesn't know about her past. One of the former sidekicks is going to be played by a young man named AJ Rashetta, who was a student of mine when I was teaching and is also an expert martial artist and expert at parkour. He's going to play the first Red Squire. And then my son is going to play the second Red Squire. He's an actor and actually a psychology student. And I figured since he's the character's son, he's got experience playing the son of a cranky old man. So he'll play the second Red Squire. And so I think that's everybody I've cast now. I'm still looking for somebody to play young Lady Avnik in a flashback sequence, and somebody to play the Red Squire when he's older and bitter about what happened to him. I want to read Batman now as an adult. I'm sort of like, I was reading some Golden Age Batman last night, actually. I'm sort of shocked. Like, nobody goes, "You're taking a kid into this?" You're going out and getting shot at, and you've got this kid with you, and he's your kid. And I think that needs to be addressed.
Clearly, a violation of any child endangerment laws in any decade.
I think there's a line in there. There's a line in there where the second Red Squire says, this stuff isn't what you guys think it is. It's not all fun. When somebody's shooting at you, it's not fun. And one of the villains goes, never understood why Child Protective Services didn't arrest him.
That makes sense. As of the moment, as we are recording this, you have 126 backers. You got 15 days left to go. You got $11,156 out of your $15,000 goal. I just gonna read through each tier, so you can pledge up to any amount before $25 and you'll get a special thanks. $25 gets you a digital copy of the movie. $50 gets you a digital copy of the movie and access to extras. And $100 gets you the TwiKnight disc. Is that his equivalent of a Batarang?
Yeah, this is the TwiKnight disc. This is his equivalent of a Batarang. I wanted him to have a non-lethal weapon because, frankly, who doesn't need a non-lethal weapon, right? And
Batman has a lethal Batarang.
Well, that was one of the things I was thinking about. Like, Batman has these Batarangs that are like shuriken. They're like ninja stars now.
Right.
That was something that they did in year one, which I thought was clever at the time. And everybody's like, run with that. And it seemed kind of bloodthirsty. So I wanted him to have a non-lethal weapon. So it also has his mask on it. So it's sort of like the Green Hornet seal. He leaves it behind him. And he can throw this. So this is what we're going to use as the prop. And this is also a promotion giveaway. And it's also a bottle opener.
Always
and a refrigerator
useful
magnet.
In any situation. Always
and
useful.
And a refrigerator magnet.
Also always useful in any situation.
So you can defeat the chancellor. I mean, you can defeat the provost, and you can hold takeout menus to your refrigerator.
I find anything over the $100 mark really interesting because you're basically offering your services in order to help people with their graphic novel, with their voice acting, looking at their script. Do you get a lot of enjoyment out of mentoring people?
Yes, I originally left when I saw that my time at Warner's was coming to an end. I went to get my MFA so I could teach. So that was always a dream of mine. So I enjoy it. And my day job now is I do script analysis for companies in Los Angeles. They send me scripts and I give them notes on it. But I also, I've been a director and a writer, and I was the guy who went through portfolios at Warner Brothers. I'm the guy who pulled Darwin Cook's portfolio out of the slush pile. So I kind of know what I'm doing.
What was that like, discovering Darwin Cook?
It's not like you find somebody and you go, oh my God, this is the greatest. It's like, it was like, oh, this guy can draw, and he was doing sort of a riff on a Walt Simonson story from Batman. So I knew his instincts were in the right place.
$500, you get is the producer's room. You get a password protected website. You can see the raw footage and uploaded edits. $1,000, people get listed as associate producer, 2,500 a co-producer, and 5,000 executive producer. That one has no backers as of yet, but it's limited to only 2.
There's a couple people sniffing around it. I wish they would stop sniffing, but yes, I've gotten inquiries about that.
How will you after the release of this movie and after you make it and you give it to your backers, how are you planning to distribute it to a wider audience?
Right now, the plan is mostly for festivals and screenings to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then I'm looking at different options to put it into wider release, whether YouTube or there's a couple of new streaming services that are coming up that are specifically tied to festivals and festival circuits that I'd like to look at and find out. I don't think anybody makes a short film to make money.
Yeah.
I think you make a short film because you're passionate about it and you think it might help your career some. You know, I've struggled with years with there's sort of a stigma attached to having worked in animation. Um, and while I've sold feature scripts, um, I still have struggle with that, and I don't dislike it, but I can do more, and I've always aimed at doing more. You know, I didn't, I sort of fell into animation. I grew up with a passion for entertainment and for media, but animation was just a part of that. So, you know, I've had plays produced. I've acted in plays. I've acted in movies. I've produced films, animated films. But you know, it's time for me to move on and try something different. This is really, you know, a lot of my career was making sure that other people's stuff got done. Um, and this is the time for me to make sure my stuff gets done.
Now is the time. Why do you think there's still a stigma for animation? That sounds crazy to me. I feel like animation's proved itself time and time again.
Well, it's a stigma that you can't do anything else. That's where um, uh, that's where your talents lie, and that you know, executives tend to look at animation as if it's something really different and really weird, and it's not just storytelling. And they treat it almost like there's a difference between uh, live action and animation as much of a difference as there is between theater and film. Like it's a completely different art form.
I was gonna
I had
say, yeah.
I sold a script once. I sold a live action feature script, and the producer said to me, "I can't wait until I get some real writers on this thing."
What?
Yeah,
That sounds crazy.
yeah.
What is what does that even mean?
That's just the way it goes. It's just, you know, the way people think.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say with your role and the things that you've done, I feel like, you know, it's not like Bruce Timm, whose very specific role is to make sure that the animation itself gets going. I mean, with your role, you could theoretically do anything in any field.
Well, yeah, theoretically, yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, I wrote and I ran shows, so um, you know, theoretically, but they think it's a much different thing. And I mean, the nuts and bolts of animation is much different than live action television. I mean, like you know, a 3-camera sitcom shoots and rehearses and shoots in 5 days and edits in 5 more days, whereas an animated TV program of the same length takes about 9 months from start to finish. So, you know, there's different things to manage, but yeah, it's all, you know, it's kind of like friends of mine who are in project management, and they've got years of experience, but they get turned down for jobs because they don't know this particular software. You know, so it's not about, you know, it's a once again it's a tunnel vision where, well, we use this software and you have to know how to use this software in order to be a production manager, where production management is a wide variety of skills.
As if that all that stuff isn't learnable.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
with Last Night of the TwiKnight, once you're done with this, do you have any intentions of going back to it?
Going back to
To
animation
this?
or to
No, to
to
Last Night of to this world, to TwiKnight.
I would like to explore doing a feature length version of it. I'm sorry, Tom Mason is one of the other producers on it, and he, you know, is from Malibu Comics and created Dinosaurs for Hire. And he's a writer with a good deal of television and animation experience. And I've talked to him about, you know, if there's a way to expand this into a feature, I'd like to explore it and see what he thought about collaborating with me on it. I think. There's a feature there. I don't see it right now, but I'm not sure if the mockumentary way would be the best way to go about it, or if that would be a piece of it.
Okay, so it might if you do continue it, it's not necessarily going to be in the same format, but it'll definitely be in the same world.
Yeah, it'll be about these characters. I think there's some deeper things to go into with the characters, and plumb the depths of their obsessions. I mean, what's funny about these characters is that they take this all so seriously, and yet you start looking at them as real people. Part of the thing about this too is that I look at and even movies that I like, and people keep saying they want their superheroes to be super realistic. They want to be really realistic, and I've heard people even say that about the Zack Snyder stuff. Is that they like it because the Batman was really fighting in it, and it was really realistic. And I think it's not really realistic. And if you really drag this down to be real, it's going to be funny.
Yeah.
One of the comments is that he says it was always trouble finding costumes because you can't just go to a tailor and pay him because he's going to talk, right? So you wind getting a lot of weird mail order catalogs and a lot of weird bondage stuff.
It's true. Like every time I hear people say that the Zack Snyder stuff is too realistic, I'm like, in what world is that realistic?
So I used to fight, when I was younger. I competed in what was sort of like the very early days of MMA. They didn't even call it that. And like even if you watch an MMA fight, I mean, these are really highly trained people, and it looks nothing like it does in a movie, and it hurts. Like I can tell you that winning a fight hurts almost as much as losing a fight.
Does that part of your background inform this movie as well?
A good deal, yes. Yeah, I started like I was not at a very high level of competition. I wasn't even particularly good, right? My teacher used to say to me, getting out of the way of a punch is part of the game, Shaun. You don't have to take the punishment. So I started thinking about I didn't even compete a lot, and I had 3 concussions. So imagine what it's like after 30 years of doing this.
Oh my. Okay. Do you have any stretch goals once you meet the $15,000?
Not yet. I think we'll address that as we get there. I mean, we're close to the 15 now, so it's something that we're talking about. But I not yet. I haven't worked out any real stretch goals.
All right. Do you have anything else to add for last night of the TwiKnight before you wrap?
I don't think so. I mean, I just hope that it comes across as it is a comedy. It's it's not all dark. It's silly fun with. That's why it's called a funny sad short.
Well, his weapon is a bottle opener. I'm kidding. So yeah, before you wrap, I just wanted to say I want to thank you. I've had Dan Reba on the show. I want to thank you because the Justice League very specifically came out at a time I went to the States for college, and I was watching it. Before long, my friends were watching it with me. Every time a new episode aired, we made a drinking game out of it. There are so many nights.
What was the drinking game?
So many nights I can't remember. It all started with a game we called Drinkstis League.
What was the drinking game like? How did you play it?
It was we got to take a shot every time Superman gets knocked down. Which happened a lot in season 1.
Yeah.
Or gets knocked through a wall. Like every time it's pointed out implicitly or explicitly that Batman had no powers. So like whenever anybody had to carry him.
Right.
Or when Amazo says flat out, you have no powers. Every time Wonder Woman says something like Great Hera or Zeus or anything of the sort. Anytime the Martian Manhunter reminds you of a wise old shaman. Anytime Green Lantern shoots something out of his ring. Anytime the Flash is inappropriate. And the thing that the thing that killed us the most was anytime Hawk Girl hit anything with her mace.
Wow, you guys were going for the deep cuts.
Yeah, I think a couple years ago, a friend of mine came to visit me from the States, and we were like, all right, let's try to play that game again. And I think maybe 5 minutes in, we were like, we cannot play this game anymore. We're too old. It's been 18 years. It's can't do it. So thank you for that. I'll never forget those.
But bless you, son. I'm happy I could contribute to your college experience that way.
Yeah, we.
I just had to be one of a bunch of actors going into biker bars and trying to act tough. That was how I got drunk. So.
Yeah, I went to school in the middle of nowhere, so it was like there was maybe 2 bars. So everybody had to pregame before going anywhere. So okay, this is how we're doing it then. So thank you, Shaun McLaughlin. I will put down the links down below to Last Night of the TwiKnight. I hope people go there, visit it, back it if it appeals to you guys. It looks really fun. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.